all our meetings. Appreciate being here, and especially here at the whole thing. Made good connections with legislators and help them remember. Anyway, we would like to start off with, I guess what we're going to do. Alexa Oldham, policy analyst, our LLAA program manager, Megan Jacobs, our legislative team. They're bringing. Yeah. Again, I want to invite you to take 30 seconds to introduce yourselves. The lead team, what's that order?
Microphone should be picking up. Can someone online just let us know if you can hear us? Because I'm not seeing the little green pop up on.
I can hear you. I just can't find you. This is Tammy.
Oh, are you here?
I'm at 355. Sorry to disrupt the meeting.
Angela's popping out to look for you.
Okay,
excellent.
Thank you.
Looks like you're coming in. Perfect.
Thanks.
Nope. So Mike should pick up everywhere.
Nick, I was able to hear you clearly, but the others were breaking up.
Okay, everyone, project, and you can see these little microphones slash speakers. If you just kind of aim towards that, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 around the big table.
Taking over for Leah to make that movie interacting without matters in the court. Previously, I worked in the government on so we've been fighting out there. Thank you.
I am McKenna Marchant. I am coming from the Housing and Community Development Division, where I ran the Private Activity Bond Board. And so I interacted with you there. And then I am super excited to be here. I have also worked in the Community Development Office as a planning specialist there, and then also for Vineyard as a planner. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm from Panguitch, Utah, and I will be working with our rural communities who don't have quite that administrative capacity. So I'm really excited for that rural treat.
McKenna left from the most important job. He's with West Jordan with our planning commission. So really qualified. Jack comes back to that Jordan.
And legislative session. I'm super excited to help you out with the legislative session. And I'll be working with Dustin, Carson, and all them. And yeah, I'm studying political science right now at Brigham Young University. And I'm super excited to be here. So yeah, see me during the session.
Having been one, it's insane. And then here for the fact that she can eventually become bigger. Everything said. We'd like to sing happy birthday. Yeah, you ready?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Seth. Happy birthday to you. Yay.
If you guys want to come to my birthday party, you go to dirtmerchant.com. And my birthday party.
Three bows and chicken. Okay.
I actually did have a resident call City Hall say, why is the mayor having a birthday? City's paying for it. So let you know, the city is not paying for my birthday party.
The next item is, so then you're going to loan from Virgin to Morgan registered and operations team. We're welcome to feedback. We have time to take feedback is great. All right, the next item, 2. Lost the operations team active. All right, the review and approval of our minutes from the last meeting, December 9th, 2024, board meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
Move to approve submitted.
Second. Motion, second. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Move to approve. The next item, 3, review is the conflict of interest form. Joyous form. What I detailed things to get on it has to be done by the end. Yeah. My question about that is, you do one for our cities. So if you're doing one for your own city,
I am unsure. This one is pretty simple. You could attach that. I would just put that form on there and sign this form and attach any conflicts you may have. Ours, as you go through it, just says, I'll abide by our codes of conduct, and then you actually list out any potential conflicts and a signature. So probably more simple than your city's one.
What? Yeah. They usually
Also, just want to let anyone know, if you need a hard copy of the board packet, looks like I have 4 more still hanging around here. So just raise your hand. We'll run one over to you. Right here.
Right. Hello again, everybody. So if you have the boards and commissions vacancies memo in front of you, you will see that there are 2 vacancies that we are seeking appointments for today. The first is for the Utah Substance Abuse and Mental Health Advisory Committee. The mission of this committee is to reduce and eliminate the impact of substance use and mental health disorders in Utah. ULCT staff is recommending Councilmember Tish Baracker of Riverton City to fill the vacancy on the Utah Substance Abuse and Mental Health Advisory Committee. Councilmember Baracker is in her 8th year on the Riverton City Council and spent part of her career as a mental health nurse at a psychiatric hospital. Contrary to the memo you have in front of you, we will not be seeking an appointment for the beer tax subcommittee today, just the committee at large. While we circulate the opportunity to sit on the beer tax subcommittee to our membership network, if there's anyone that you can think of that would enjoy the opportunity to sit on the committee, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Moving on, ULCT is also recommending a representative from rural Utah to sit on the Utah Fentanyl Task Force. The mission of the task force is to address the fentanyl crisis by identifying and resolving critical gaps in data collection, preventment, treatment, awareness, and law enforcement efforts. ULCT staff is recommending Councilmember Joe Kreisman of Price to serve on the Utah Fentanyl Task Force. Councilmember Kreisman is a retired police officer that spent 9 years working undercover narcotic investigations and has spent the past 13 years as a registered nurse working with patients with substance use disorders and mental health challenges. Summarize, ULCT staff is recommending that the ULCT Board of Directors appoint Riverton Council Member Tish Baracker for the Utah Substance Abuse and Mental Health Advisory Committee, and Price Council Member Joe Kreisman for the Utah Fentanyl Task Force. With that, I'm happy to address any questions you might have about any of the recommendations or the committee that ULCT staff is putting forth. Thank you for your time.
All right, all in favor?
I move to support those two now.
Favor say aye. Four. Five. Second one with the line. But check ready. Bring that forward.
Yep, indeed. Let me just scroll on down to that. So you have in your packet the Q2 budget report. Some of the highlights along here. Things are looking very good at the end of this period. Just overall, and I mention this every time we do it. When we talk about percentages of our budget in here, that is our core budget. So that excludes the local administrative advisor program, because that is a $1.58 million grant that is almost entirely passed through, which would represent nearly a third of our whole budget. So it doesn't really give a good picture as to what's actually happening internally at the league. So just a little preface there. So far, we have collected just over 89% of our core revenue for the year. Of that revenue, about 69% is made up of membership dues, and we've collected just over 100% of those dues. Now, we always budget just a little under what 100% membership would be. I believe I'd have to double check what's come in. There are just less than a handful of smaller communities that have not paid dues this year, but we are at 98% membership there. Sponsor and donation revenue accounts for about 11% of our annual core revenue, and we've collected just over 59% of that. A reminder, because sponsorships happen on the calendar year and we're on July 1, 50% of last calendar year's sponsorship gets moved over into this year. Now, this month, the invoices will go out for sponsorship for calendar year 2025. So we'll start to see that second half start to come in. So that is a good spot to be for us right now. Registration fees are about 12% of our core budget, and we received roughly 60% of our registration fees at the end of December of last year. That does not include most of Local Officials Day. So that is still coming in, and then we will have our mid-year conference coming in as well. We have exceeded what we budgeted for revenue-wise in both our annual convention last year and Local Officials Day now. So we expect that budget item to bring in more than we have budgeted for, unless there's a major drop-off in mid-year. We broke a record last year at mid-year, so I don't foresee that. Also, exhibit space, we're at 65% there, and that is entirely from the annual convention. 56% of the grants and special project revenue has been recognized for this period. That includes the ARPA assessment from about 3 years ago and our Your Land, Your Plan grant. That money had already been received, but that is revenue received in advance. So as we spend that money in a fiscal year, that's when we recognize the revenue because they're tied together. As I mentioned, we have the Local Administrative Advisor Program. We have received 90% of the funds for that in this fiscal year. And in turn, we give 90% out to the respective AOGs. And then we receive the final 10% when we submit our final report. And we give the final 10% out to the AOGs when that report comes in. Expenditure-wise, we are right on track in a spot I like to see. We are at 47% of what's budgeted for the year, with 50% of the year having gone by. Personnel services account for about 53% of our core budget, and we are at 47% on that. Our operating and engagement expenses is 18% of our core budget, and we have spent 35% of that so far in this year. Events are just over a quarter of our budgeted expenditures, and we've spent just over 54% so far. Annual is a more expensive conference than mid-year, so that makes total sense. Mentioned grants and special projects on the expenditure end of things. It is tied to that revenue, and that is how we recognize it. And then our spending for the Local Administrative Advisor Program also has a key source of revenue that we are tied to there. So at the end of the first half of fiscal year 2025, the league is $1,500,000 sorry, $1,559,495 revenue over expenditures, and the finances are in great shape. We would now ask for a motion from the board to approve the Q2 financial report as well as the Q2 check register. You can see in your packet a breakdown of all of the numbers that I just went through, as well as I think a bunch of pages of our check register of all the checks cut in the Q2 of the year. If you have any questions on any of those specific expenditures, we're happy to address those. And we do not have our check files here since we are off site, but we can look into those if you have any questions.
Make that. Hey, will you bring your mic?
I cannot because it's plugged in to the computer. The rest are Bluetooth.
Perfect. Thank you to those who've joined us online as well. And keep letting us know on the microphones. We're using self-house Wi-Fi. And anyway, we'll keep tweaking it here, but we'll use, which one? Am I talking this one?
Yep.
Okay, great. Great. In your memo, in your packet, there's a memo that outlines 3 potential options for membership dues for next year. As a reminder from the December board meeting, and the timing of how things operate, you need to approve the membership dues for next year, either at this meeting or in the March meeting when we meet after the session. We presented to you in December, and several of you asked, in an ideal world, how much money would we need to do just your average cost of living increases, merit-based pay increases, and the like. So we've prepared an option that addresses that piece. As a reminder, if you kept the dues formula as is, because of the spike in property value that we've seen across the state, the membership dues, and this is in that background section, the membership dues would have a property value growth of 31.4%. And so we are not recommending that. We're recommending ratcheting that down and then finding the right balance between property, population, and sales tax, the 3-legged stool of our dues formula. So we have presented 3 options for your consideration. I'll actually start at the bottom with option 3. Option 3 is what you as a board, several board members had asked, what would be the amount that you would need? That would be option 3. So that's one end of the spectrum. If we had to keep all the aggregates under 5%. Then you have options 1 and option 2. Both of these would reduce the property valuation rate, bringing them back down in line with what you would see more of a natural occurrence as opposed to the spikes that we've seen the last couple of years. And then you can see the aggregate amount under option 1 would be about 89,000, and the aggregate amount in option 2 would be about 106,000. And then it's broken down so you can see if everyone continued as members, how much would come in based on each of the factors: property value, sales tax, population, and then the $500 minimum for our small towns. So with that, prepared what it looks like for each city in the state. So you can look at the cities and towns within your region. And again, you can take action today, or you can take action in March. So Mayor Walker, I'm going to stay down here so I can answer questions in the mic, make sure people hear, and then I'll just repeat the questions as they arise.
Do we have any questions for Cameron? All right, is there a motion?
We have 3 options before you. If you want to make a motion today, or if you want to wait until March, either way would work.
I'll just also add a little context there that is included in the memo. We have preliminary numbers for the next fiscal year. And we have seen that a slowdown in that growth in property tax or property valuation that will not look at 31% next year. And we're seeing comparable growth in both population and sales tax receipts in the low ones, low fours kind of far.
Mr. Chair, question on option 3 gives you the 118,000. And then when you go to the next paragraph, it talks about cost of living adjustment of 3% is going to require basically $116,000. So it seems like that option would cover the natural increase in the budget requirements for next year. Other than an option 2 would not give you that same coverage.
Mr. Chair, what Councilor Dugan is saying is accurate. We prepared option 3 as that starting point that based on what we estimate personnel costs to be, if you wanted to cover all the personnel costs just through dues, option 3 basically gets you there. We also prepared option 1 and option 2 as smaller increases for a couple of reasons. One, the last couple of years, we have exceeded expectations in our conference revenue. So there's some flexibility there that didn't exist 3 years ago. And because of those, without going through the whole history of it, our conference revenue basically went like this during COVID because there were no conferences. And then the first couple of conferences after COVID, we were well below what we previously were. Now we're above what we expect. And so we've actually been able to build up our reserves with that extra money, but we weren't sure, does 1 year make a trend? Now we've seen a couple of years of above average attendance and registration fees and sponsor revenue. And so we can, option 1 or option 2, while not covering the whole amount, we can accommodate either of those related revenue and the reserves from the last couple of years.
And do we have a minimum amount in the reserves? Do we keep a minimum amount percentage wise?
We're required by state law under the Interlocal Entities Act to be between 25 and 50. Oh, right. So the enterprise fund. That's right. Go ahead. Yeah.
So we've adopted in our own policies that our reserves should remain between 25% and 50% of the previous year's general revenue, that core revenue I was talking about before. It's not required by state law because our entire budget is an enterprise fund, and that's dealt with a little differently as an interlocal. So we are, and it does say should in our policies, between 25 and 50%. As of last year, we were right up on that 50% mark. So we will likely, in the next year's budget that we'll bring to you in May, we'll want to spend down some of those reserves depending on how we're looking. And that is there because we want to make sure we have some reserves, at least a quarter of a year, but we want to make sure we don't just build it up, keep having dues go up as our reserves just inflate.
Right, because we don't want to have to then do that because then your reserves are too high. So in actuality, we don't need to cover our full expenses because we have such a
That's correct.
That high reserves could actually cover a number of years, even if we were to say flat as far as the revenue side was concerned.
Yeah. Again, because we've had 2 years of above average conference revenue, and we put most of that into reserves. So now, but again, reserves is one-time money versus the ongoing money.
Okay.
We do intend to spend down those reserves, which is why we prepared 2 options that were below that threshold amount.
Okay.
Councilmember Dugan, are you recommending option 3? Is that what I hear you saying?
After this conversation, I would not recommend option 3. I'm going to recommend option 2. Just the middle road.
And just maybe a comment to that, Mr. Chair.
But
I have a similar thought as you in terms of, I don't know that we need to get all of our revenue from what I would call a property tax increase, right, in terms of how we all operate. But we have the ability and have had the history where we're getting money out of our other revenues. And I think it's fair to say we're probably going to continue because we keep doing a good job. The staff's putting on a great conference, and I think everybody understands the value. So I would support the second option 2 as proposed.
So that would be my motion is option 2.
So we have a motion for option, motion, second, Vice Chair. Okay, any further discussion?
Ask the staff just to scroll back to where we see the options.
This will, so I can show 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 at the same time. Also in your packets.
Two at the same time.
In your packets, you'll see for each one of these options, how they affect every single city in town. So the full layout is included for all those options.
We'll get to show the total on option 2. Oh, it's, yes.
I gotta say, I'd really prefer us going option 1 and put more dependence on that. There's not a big enough difference between 2 and 3 for me to justify it. I'd rather see us go with an option 1 and depend more on our revenues and so forth, our convention to really bridge that gap.
That a substitute motion?
Yeah.
Okay, so we got a substitute motion for option 1. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second, doubles. You good? Any further discussion on the substitute motion?
I just worry that we're getting, again, I see the increases and certainly understand why. But as I look down the list of dues for our cities, I think we're going to get to a point where we're going to have some cities just say, we just can't do this anymore. I mean, I grabbed South Jordan's at 75 grand. And then I look at Salt Lake's at 245,000. And at some point, the city's going to look at that and go, nah, we're not there. And so I get a little fearful every time we do this. And
All right, anybody else? All right, so on the substitute motion, which is to approve option number 1 for the dues, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, then if we go back to your original motion, I think it's dead. So we'll move on now to the next. Okay. Thank you. Perfect. So that takes us to item number 6. This is a bylaws update by Roger. And
I don't know where the mic is, if you hear me anywhere, I'll assume you can.
We have a mic. Dan, yeah, Councilor, can you pass that down?
that's Mike.
All right, I got the mic. I'll be brief here. The bylaws need to have a wholesale rewrite. That's why you're seeing a lot of red here, because frankly, I started part of that. We took a whole section out. That's one of the projects I promised Cam I'll do before I retire. It's a long list, so I'll work on that.
Really slow.
Yeah. But this time around, we do have 4 bylaw changes that are being proposed. 2 of them relate to the legislative policy committee meeting. 1 relates to the Budgetary Procedures Act, and that's really all deletions, isn't it? And the last relates to an ex officio for former presidents. So I guess with that in mind, I think Justin's the one about to describe the LPC changes. They're yours. I'll do them if you want.
What about you? Got the mic by you?
Yeah.
So the LPC changes, 2 changes there. 1, we've had some issues with the cities changing membership of their LPC members, sometimes on a weekly basis, which is a pain, to use the technical term. And so our first change is a proposal that if you're going to change LPC roster, we get that changed before the first LPC of the session. And then if you need to make other changes, you can make that during August. So just kind of standardizing when those changes are made, knowing that we need to do a wholesale rewrite on things. We know we need to put in some mechanism to change things if there's a vacancy on the councilor or mayor or whatever that is. But we can pick that up later. Right now, we'll just make the change. It'll be fine. But that's the first thing. And then the other one we've talked about throughout the year is changing some of our positions. We've added the position of monitor into the positions that we already have. Just these are the bills that we have a lot of bills that are sort of no position, neutral, whatever they are. They're bills that we need to keep track of for situational awareness, but they're not bills that we really intend to engage on. And so adding in that position of monitor and then clarifying a little bit what some of those other positions look like, giving us a little bit more leeway on what no position and neutral mean. So those changes are. Happy to take any questions about what the effects of that will be.
I have a question on, I'm assuming that people are changing their membership or their voters based on this week, you three can go, and this week, you three can go.
A little bit of that, not completely. Sometimes what we're getting, to be frank, is some back and forth between mayor's office and council's office about who gets to be on the LPC, and it's causing some issues.
Yeah, if that's the case, I don't like that at all. I don't know how to deal with, there's an issue, our city wants to vote, we need to weigh in on it, but I can't go, and so I've asked her to go in my place. And so if you've got a mechanism, and candidly, I've never looked to know how you deal with that.
So right now, yeah, we don't have a mechanism for an alternate right now. It hasn't happened a lot, but it's something we could look at in the rewrite. We're trying to just kind of clarify that one piece and then back and fix that up.
Of some feud, I don't want the league to be in that role. I think that's a bad place for us.
We don't either. So we can, like I said, this is some, we can look at this more in a wholesale rewrite, but this one will at least give some clarity for right now.
Any questions on?
Would that apply to this year?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, next week till next.
You'd have till Monday to get us
Monday to
your rosters.
It's frozen for a while.
Yeah. And like I said, there is not a lot of this going on. I don't want to say like most going up every week with a new one, but there are cities out there that are requiring us to write a law or a bylaw that will fix it.
Okay, the next issue is the budgetary procedures changes, and that, Nick, was just the deletion of everything, isn't it?
Yes. So when you adopted our financial policies and procedures back in September, we included the budgeting process there. We didn't want it to be duplicative or contrary to what's in bylaws. So we've essentially taken that out of bylaws and just included it in our financial policies and procedures.
The last item deals with a new status of ex officio members, and this is one, it was all in one paragraph. When I tried to split it out, put the roles of the treasurer, which was and then the ex officios, and basically the ex officio membership are of the board are the treasurer, the representative of the municipal clerks, the general counsel, and adding the category of former presidents of the league with the proviso that they still have to hold an elected office in the city in which they were serving when they were president. So it's not a lifetime come as you go. And it is at the discretion of whether that individual wishes to continue to have that role. So that's how that is written up. That's major change. The last one is a rewrite of the one we adopted a year or so ago, which is that the board can adopt what I call special purpose ex officio membership. We have currently one that Mayor Ramsey is currently servicing. So the main change here was the ex officio status of former league presidents. And that concludes all of the changes, notwithstanding all of the red bloodletting. You see?
It? Presentation one?
That's it.
That's it.
Go ahead.
I'm trying to go through this and make sure the answer is probably in there. Did you see there was by January 1st is when you want the LPC members?
No, by the first Monday. So by the first Monday of the session. So next Monday. So a little bit of a crunch this year. In the future, that would be a whole lot of notice.
Sure, we're serving where we're set and we go. So it was January 1st, you wouldn't be ready by
January 1st, and the first Monday of the session.
Yep. So yeah, this should fit perfectly.
Anybody else with any questions or comments?
I have one. If we approve this today, does this go into effect on Monday?
Yes.
Yes.
Is there a motion? Number 6.
I'll make a motion to approve the bylaw changes.
We got a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That appears unanimous. Item number 7. A ULCT engagement report. Molly. Any capacity? Molly?
I'll be quick and then we'll have Cassidy come up. We wanted to give you an update with where we are on our conflict competence needs assessment. We contracted with the EDR program through the University of Utah to conduct a series of interviews. They conducted about 30 interviews with our members and then also launched a survey for our members that had about 200 people respond. Right now, they are working to clean the data and essentially anonymize all the interviews so that they can give us those reports on what people are looking for. But as of right now, we've had about, as I mentioned, 30 interviews and about 200 people completed the survey, expressing a bunch of interest in conflict competence, both elected officials as well as administrative staff. We'll have more details as to specifically what that looks like and how we envision that training unfolding in the future. But a few topics that were really identified as a big need for folks was how to address misinformation, helping folks effectively navigate conflict, angry or hostile community members, angry or hostile municipal officials, lack of resources and time, fear of litigation or adverse action from conflict, disagreement amongst elected officials, disagreement amongst elected officials and administrative staff, and just lack of adequate policies, procedures, and skills as to how to navigate conflict. And so we're going to look at how we can build that out to get these skills and resources available to our members so that we can all, as we learned when she came and spoke with us last fall, conflict just is. And so it's best if we can all figure out how to navigate that. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And if not, I'm happy to turn the time over to Cassidy.
Any questions or comments for Molly? Maybe you want Cassidy, come on.
Great. I just wanted to give the board a quick update on our communications with our members. So something we did 6 months ago is we switched our email platform system. Before we were with Granicus, and it wasn't meeting our needs in terms of data we wanted with our members' profiles. And just like technically, it was really hard for our staff to use and not very friendly, which makes it hard when Justin's on the Hill trying to get an email sent and I might be sending an email about a webinar. It just wasn't very conducive toward our needs. So what we did is we switched to a new system. It's called Klaviyo. It has better data processing for segmentation. And this is one of the reasons why we're pushing to have LPC be a little bit more solidified, is because right now we're sending an email out to our LPC voting members, reminding them to register for LPC. And I'm sure several of you have received that email. Similarly, after LPC, we're sending a follow-up email that includes the homework that we've asked for. So by keeping our list a little bit tighter, we know we're getting to the right people. Similarly, we are starting to use more personalized webinar invitations. So in our new system, we now have the title that people have, what municipality they're from, and a few other different items if they've attended events recently and things like that. And we're using that to target emails that are important to them. So for example, if we have a meeting about RDAs, we know that we want those to go to people who are in development, our council members, any planning commissioners we have. So instead of just blasting everything out to everyone all the time, we've done some segmentation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I hope you've noticed, or you're getting more emails now. Sorry. One thing we've really seen is we've gone through all of our emails that we had in our old system and got rid of everyone who didn't really belong. So in the old system, it would offer our email newsletter up to just anyone. They're like, oh, you've signed up for this email? So I'd have someone from like New York on our email list. It was just like really affecting our open rates. So the first year with the old email system, the open rate was about 40%. When I started in July of 2023, it was about 33%. Since we've cleaned up our email and have a new system, and we've still had about the same amount of contacts, so we have about 4,000 contacts within the system, our new open rate is now 50% on Friday Facts. Industry standard for government is about 41%. So we're doing pretty well there. A few other different open rates. For our LPC reminder, we have a 61% open rate, and the follow-up and homework reminders a 65% open rate. And then one thing that our members have started to rely upon, and I maybe regret doing, is we send them their Zoom link right before their webinar. And the open rate for that for our LPC, so we're like, hey, you're joining LPC online, here's your Zoom link, is 80%, and our webinars are about 73%. So with the new email system, our biggest goal is just to really strengthen our communication from league to membership. So that way we can empower the members to advocate for themselves and to be in the know. So this session, we're excited to announce that all of the emails that we do action alerts on, when you get an action alert, your legislators' contacts will be at the bottom of that action alert. And that's because it's segmented by city. We also are going to have better video integration for the LPC recaps and for testimonies that staff give on the Hill. So we're like really excited that we're going to have a better tool that hopefully will give our members confidence to advocate for themselves. And I'll take any questions if you have them, but hopefully that kind of gives you a better idea of what we have to offer in terms of communications.
Do we designate which email you send different categories to?
I can make that happen for you, Mayor. Any other questions?
Question, just a comment. That's really impressive. That's a lot of work to add your legislator's name and contact information to the action alerts. So much work. That's going to be a lot of work. It'll be very valuable, but it's not lost on us that that's a ton of work. So thank you. That's above and beyond, and I think it will pay off. But that's impressive. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and Mayor Walker, I just want to piggyback on what Mayor Ramsey said. When we hired Cassidy, she and I sat down on our first day, and she'd worked in a city previously, right, Mayor Burton?
That's right. She did.
And so I just asked her, how are we doing on communications? Because she has a phenomenal communications background. She was diplomatic, but also said there's room to grow here, and that's in part why we had hired her. So we're very excited because the strength of the league is the membership. It's getting that information out. It's getting the action alerts out. And I remember when we first started sending the nightly email, because I was the one who did it, and I built an email list in a Excel spreadsheet, and my email account would only allow me to send like 200 emails at a time. So I would copy and paste multiple emails each night. So to go from that, wasn't that long ago, to now Cassidy really making our communications efforts much more sophisticated and targeted and more user-friendly for you to then contact legislators is amazing. And so thank you very much, Cassidy, for all the behind the scenes work.
Welcome. Thank you. Item number 8, the legislative priorities.
Perfect. Great. Well, we need some direction on some key issues. And before we jump into those, let me just do a quick reminder of board duties during the legislative session. One of our strategic objectives is to maximize political capital at the Capitol. And a key way we do that is through the league officers. In fact, yesterday morning, the league officers met with the governor's senior staff, and we talked through a handful of key priorities. And then we will have 2 calls each week with the officers. Likewise, you as board members are all automatically on the Legislative Policy Committee. One thing I'll add from the bylaws earlier is our bylaws do allow for an alternative voting delegate currently. So to address Seth's point of Mayor Mendenhall can't go, as long as you have your alternate designated, the alternate can come, and that's fine. So we do not have any board meetings scheduled during the session. We've tried that in the past, and frankly, the problem was we'd schedule board meetings and, well, there's nothing to talk about today because things are okay. Or everything just blew up. We don't have time for a board meeting because we need to go talk to legislators. So board members are automatically on LPC. And then if necessary, we'll call board meetings if there's something we really need board direction on. Otherwise, we'll be relying on the officers and individual communication. We have a daily briefing. You're all welcome to join it. Many of your cities have staff that join it. It's a hybrid call, 10:15 each morning. And we walk through what's on the agenda for the next 24 to 48 hours. And as I look around the room, most of your cities have somebody who's in those daily briefing calls. We meet with the city managers every Friday as well. And then we have subgroups on different topics. So I mentioned earlier today, we have a tourism tax group. It's going to be meeting tomorrow afternoon. In fact, you're on my to-do list to quickly chat after the board meeting about what these proposals could mean in Monticello and in San Juan County. So we're trying to make sure we've got broad representation in all of our different subgroups that then feed into the larger LPC. So are there any questions about board duties during the session? Okay, great. There are three general categories that we want to spend the next almost an hour getting some direction on. And category number 1 is in the election space, and I'll turn it to Justin in just a moment. Category number 2 is in the homelessness space. You can see the questions in the agenda, and Molly will lead that. And then in the housing land use space, there are actually 2 things we want to do there. Number 1 is we want to just share with you some of the LPC survey results that we've received in recent weeks that I think inform the political capital at the Capitol. And then we want to deliberate on the latest on the plan review piece. In addition to the LPC survey results, one of the survey results revolves around density bonuses for affordable home ownership. And Lehigh City is pioneering a tool that I attended a council meeting, it feels like forever ago now, it was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, but it was, well, in the legislative time, it feels like forever ago now because it was pre-session. But there was a tremendous 2-hour discussion at the city council meeting, and the mayor's been leading out on that. So I want to give him some time to say, here's what they're trying to accomplish and see how it fits into some of these other legislative pieces. So we'll try to spend 10 to 15 minutes on elections and homelessness, and about 25 on housing, and then we'll ratify the bill tracker. Justin, I'll turn it to you for the elections.
All right, do we have slides up somewhere? Do we have any of the advocacy slides? Do we share those, Nick? Of course we didn't.
Me right now and get them up.
I'm going to share them with you right now.
Guys, they can email us.
Because no, that's right. My slides are not. Hey, but the rest of the local officials day went great, right? Forgot to send the slides. So I just shot over to you to share it. So talking about elections a little bit. So if you've seen the priorities that are coming out of the House in particular, they've made it very clear that election reform is something they'd like to tackle this year. So when we say election reform, what is it that we're talking about? In several interviews and the things that the speaker has said, the other members of the House have said, we've heard from other sources, is that they want to make some reforms around vote by mail. There's always those that want to get rid of the signature gathering route. They've said that's not really on the table this year. But they do want to make some caucus reforms around, or some reforms around vote by mail. So here's what some would look like. Ballots would still be mailed out to all voters, but then those voters, all of us, would need to take those ballots back in person, show ID, and drop off the ballot. So a ballot gets mailed to you, but you don't mail the ballot back. Some other proposals around this has said, we mail the ballot to you, you have to take it back in person and show ID, and at the polls, you can request to have a ballot mailed to you in the future. So you have to make that request. It has to be something you do in person. You send that in. Other things they're looking at are things like changing the postmark for returned ballots. So right now, a ballot will be counted if it has been postmarked before Election Day. There's been changes, sometimes proposals to postmark on Election Day. One of the proposals out there would say that a ballot has to be received by, for example, 8 p.m. on Election Day. We don't care when it was postmarked. We don't care when it was dropped off. Just if they have it in custody at 8 p.m., those ballots get counted. Anything received after that is not counted. One note on that one, a lot of the other, there's only a few other vote by mail states, but other vote by mail states, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, they have something like a deadline where they're received in. They don't have the postmark issue. So it's not a wild thing. Other vote by mail states do that. The voters just know you've got to get your ballot in or put it in a drop box. So the question that we have here is, in the vote by mail space in particular, but in some of these other election reform discussions, how involved do we as a league want to be? Now, here's why I asked the question. We all have elections in our cities. A lot of these debates often run both at the county level and then at the state level because the county clerks are the ones who are ultimately running elections across all of the state at this point. That's who everybody's contracting with. That's where everything's running through. And so a lot of times they are the voice on these things. They negotiate on things. They work through things. And historically, cities have sometimes been involved in elections, but have been pretty deferential to discussions around the counties and lieutenant governor's office. That being said, we all have elections in our cities. So that's sort of the threshold question is, as far as political capital goes and involvement goes, how much do we either want to push back or be involved in or jump into the negotiations when it comes to some of these reforms and discussions? Sort of an open-ended question.
Could you mail us a ballot on that? And we'll
Only if you bring it back in person.
I don't think it's our lane. I think there's others fighting the fight. No.
I agree.
Agreed.
You think we shouldn't be fighting this one?
In terms of, you're asking, should we get involved in the discussion about election reform?
Yeah.
In my city, we were getting 9 and 10% voter turnout in 2011, 2013, 2015. We jumped to 40. Our lowest, I think, is 32%. Since then, that's a game that I don't want to lose. Like, I think it's great that we're getting more representation. So I think it is something we want to be involved in and discussing. There are issues out there that I'm gonna oppose, you know, in terms of how you might see voter fraud or, you know, different topics. But I think in terms of elections, we've got a role to play.
I think this
we're 50% of the elections, right? We're every outlet.
And this is our duties as residents and as cities to vote. I mean, this is our primary, right? That's your one freedom. You need to vote. And if what they're trying to do here is kind of curtail that, 9 to 45%, that's incredible. Right? You know, in Salt Lake City, you know, my district, 65% will vote. Other districts, under 30% vote. And we got to make it easier for them to vote across the board. And I think if you're going to squelch that one freedom that we have and make it easier, there's been no evidence to show that this voting by mail has created any fraud other than anything else. It's nothing, it's not high. Now that's maybe this discussion's here, but there's nothing any higher there. And so to squelch that, and if you're in the manufacturing world, there's Six Sigma, right? It's like, and that's basically 99.9% downwards. And the error rate is like 4 or 5 per million. And if you look at your credit card bills and everything else, there's rarely an error in that thing on the credit card bill. There's rarely an error on your checking bills, right? And so, and this is probably even above that level of error-free. So I think we really need to push hard that and fight for make it voting actually easier than harder. And this is going to make it harder.
So I think if I could comment really quick to Seth's point. So for anyone who doesn't know, I used to work in the state elections office. So I have a little background in this one.
Stop telling people that, they'll stop asking you.
Every once in a while, it does help. So no, to Seth's point, so for voter turnout, for vote by mail, there is not a lot of indication there's a massive change in voter turnout at statewide presidential type elections for vote by mail. Everybody knows there's a presidential election. We get high turnout. But for a municipal level, there is a lot of evidence that shows we're getting up to a 50% increase in turnout from vote by mail versus not vote by mail. So there is a demonstrable increase in turnout when you're doing vote by mail. So that is something that's not just, you know, Spanish Fork, that's happening all across the board.
You know, when you say the proposal, if I heard, you know, what they're talking about at the moment, that we mail it and then we staff to receive it at 100% in order for you to vote. That's the worst of all options, right? I have to fully staff the election, just like I might have had to in the past, and I have to mail it. So I have all of the cost. In terms of, when I used to do it with paper and pencil and I got 9%, it cost me $8,000. I loved that election in terms of, you know, fiscal cost. Now I spend in my city $100,000. But if I had to do that, I'm going to spend probably $200,000.
I got an email from our clerk an hour ago on HB 205. I guess that's one of the bills. And that was her concern, is that our elections are already costing us $120,000. The county just said it's going to cost you.
Yeah.
And if something like this passes where you don't mail it in, more ballot locations, got to pay election judges throughout the process, and the costs just go up. So he's concerned.
Yeah, it is there's a very real fiscal impact there.
One thing that you might consider, I kind of ran this by my city council a couple nights ago, and everybody likes vote by mail in my council. And I think people in general like it. Your expression was the best when he was reading it. It's the best. But I mean, I don't know that we have to go to war over it, but I think we could be involved in the discussion because I think people like it. It's I like it personally, be able to sit down weeks in advance and talk to my family or, or do my own. I mean, I think it's great to be able to do it. There are some other ideas about how we might verify it. Maybe you have to show your ID one time when you first register or whatever. I don't think the barrier, if you get out and show your ID, that's there might be ways to tweak it. So I would like to see us weigh in to keep vote by mail, not silly vote by mail, but practical vote by mail. That's my opinion on it. I think it's that important to, just keep people involved in the process, and I like it.
Well, yeah, Mayor, please.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the only reason I would maybe think that it wasn't necessarily inside our lane is because it is handled by the counties. And we have other really big things that we're working on right now and focusing on. Totally think we should stay engaged in the conversation though. Because obviously those municipal elections that aren't being paid attention to matter to all of us, for sure. But that's the only reason I would support maybe being involved, but maybe not as a league, because I think that would be more for UAC. Or is that not appropriate? I don't know.
I have one clarification to your comment. And that is in Davis County in particular, got my Davis County career right here. We've all, as cities for our municipal elections for years and years now, have contracted with the county to run our election. But we have done that at our election, at our decision making. At any point, it's true, collectively as a group or individual city, one of us could pull out and say, the city of Bountiful is running our own election. We use our, we will follow the law, but we will issue, do our own ballots, do our own counting, put up our own polling, places. We'll proceed from the post office and count. We could do that. So 50% of the time, we are the elections.
That's
for
true.
efficiency's sake, we have banded together in some areas to defer to our county clerks. But I tend to agree with Seth that this is increased voter turnout. I'm personally not necessarily convinced with the legislative audit. I thought the audit returned a really great result for the elections office. When I've sat as the board of canvassers on municipal elections in Bountiful, I've been, amazed at the detail we get back where they have challenged ballots. Or I've been amazed when we've had people that have died between early voting and election day, and they've caught it and pulled it back.
Yeah, incredible.
So I've been a fan of the increased transparency and the increased access, and I'm just always personally really sad when we don't show 100% voter turnout.
Yeah, I would say, well, we do our own as well in Park City. My question for you is, so one of the proposals, they would show up on the day of voting day, or you could do it before.
So no, and this is a great point. And at this point I was going to make here, so thank you for getting to their council member. We're not voting on a specific proposal right now, because we're going to see multiple different proposals come out, and we don't know what leadership is backing right now. We've heard various things about who's going to be running the bills. So there's a bill out there, but that's not who we thought a bill was coming from. So there could be some other things out there. So we're not saying vote yes or no on a proposal right now. That's why we don't have a specific thing up here. We'll bring it to LPC and we'll talk about specific proposals when we came up. But knowing that the House cares a lot about this and they want to do some reform, what we want to think through is politically, with political capital, if we push back on some of this, it's not going to be an easy push. We're going to have to put some effort into some of this push. So that's where the discussion needs to have, like Mayor Tran said, depending on what else is out there and what are things we're pushing back on, trying to figure out that calculus. So what I'm hearing is we want to be at the table in these discussions, and depending on what specific proposals come out, will help us inform how much we push back or not.
Because I would say if it's day of, I mean,
Day of, yeah.
speaking from Park City's perspective, if it's a snowy day, we're not going to get a lot of people to show up.
Right.
And it's also a huge time when people travel.
Mhm.
And so I wonder, how many people won't be able to vote because they're on vacation. And then, I don't know, I think we do somewhere around 70% mail-in votes. I just double checked with our clerk, but it's like a huge municipality.
And that's pretty, well, 2020, for example, 2020 is COVID, but it's a strange year, but not unrepresentative. About 90% of people were voting by mail, and 2018 was pretty close to that as well, across the entire state.
So you said something, I want to juxtapose something Mayor Walker said, that you said I liked, I don't know that this is something we need to go to war over,
Mhm.
but I definitely see us playing an educational role because we are running our elections, whether we run it and we contract to the county, my recorder is involved, even though the county's running it. So I see us at least being educators if we can be. But what you said kind of worries me, like, if you feel like we're gonna have to put a lot of capital into this, yeah, it's a tough balance for me because there are some significant issues that I'm
Mhm.
worried about. But I think this is one that it's important, but I don't know that I put it above land use. So
Right. So what I'm hearing is, and correct me if I'm hearing this wrong, is we should be engaged on it right now. Education is hugely important. I think that's generally where we're at our very best is when we bring data and fiscal and bring the information, the technical expertise. But that we should definitely keep ourselves in the room and make sure we're not just deferring this one to UAC or the counties, but we want to be a part of the discussions.
I just want to share this. So she said that mail-in ballots, 40% in primary, 60% in general. Before mail-in ballots, turnout was 9% in primary and 35% in general. It's a huge, huge difference.
Kind of a fluid situation too, because there's like 20, aren't there like 20 bills? There might be more than that. It's been 20 since I checked. I think there's about 20 election modification bills, so it's probably gone up in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So my guess is that a lot of these different concepts will end up weaved together into a grand election modification bill.
Yep.
Right, but right now there's just a lot of fragmented ideas that they're gonna have to sort out. So I don't know that we know what our position is. We like mail-in ballots. We want our folks to be able to mail them in. Our legislators came and did a town hall recently, and overwhelmingly the people said we keep the mail-in ballots. We really want that. We had a new legislator who walked away and said that was the number one thing she walked away with. People felt the strongest about that. So I think as we're talking about this, that sounds like where most of us are at, but it's going to be fluid, and we may have to just gather and have a conversation to figure out where we're at as this comes about, because it's too early to know what it'll look like.
Exactly. So, and again, yeah, so the direction you gave us is perfect. That's what we need. We'll stay at the table. We'll be a part of the discussions. We're not taking positions on anything yet. We'll do that LPC when we have specific language and specific proposals.
But I would love the discussion here, but we have all these ballots or these bills coming forward on this subject, which means that they're not all probably 100% factual in every way. There's probably a lot of holes here. So back to Seth's comment about the education side of the house, this is one where you need to lead this education before all these ballots get legs, because they're going to have a lot of misinformation in these ballots that we can't put back in the box. So we have to be smart and lead this education now and not wait till the ballots hit, because we'll never get there. So, and that lead means back from 9 to 45%, 9 to 50%, whatever it is, whatever Salt Lake City is, and how much curing we had to do on the ballots. What was the percentage of errors there? Bring all that information forward and all this information now, so we can squelch the disinformation that's going to start to occur because we got so many ballots here.
No, yeah, absolutely good point.
That's a good point, because what are we fixing? What's the broken part?
I think one of the main issues is they're concerned about people being verified as the person voting. So like there's the proposal about having a vote, you show your ID, which we used to do. You used to have to show your ID.
Yeah.
So some proposal and I just think we should stay in the room. I'm fine with that, because I know our citizens like it. And if there's a way we can come up with a reasonable way to verify a mail-in ballot that isn't get your ballot mailed, go over there and give it the same thing as going and voting. That's if we can help them get to something other than that, that might be worth our effort.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks for all that feedback. With that, I think Molly, let's take an easy issue and talk homelessness.
Oh, fresh. This fresh house. There we go. Excellent. Thank you. We've discussed this a lot as a board. And we unfortunately will probably continue to do so. In end of last year, you reaffirmed our board principles when we address homelessness, and that gives us some helpful parameters as staff as we engage in this issue. As we've discussed, this is a really dynamic issue right now, and it continues to be dynamic, and we don't exactly know where it will go. I also want to acknowledge a lot of the work and responsibility that's been put on a lot of your communities through winter response requirements, Code Blue requirements, and the cities that are also hosting permanent year-round shelters. There are a lot more stakeholders in this space than there have been in the past, and I would say there's decreased kind of coordination between those stakeholders. In the past, we're used to kind of seeing two legislators who are leading out on this. This year, we expect to see legislation from, I think, at least 7 legislators on different homelessness issues. Some will be politically viable, some may not, some we may support, some we may oppose. We're waiting to see how that all unfolds. What we do know right now is that the state is still planning on moving forward with a transformative centralized campus. The numbers we've heard from that range from anywhere from 1,000 beds to upwards of 1,600 beds, which would effectively, with that 1,600 number, almost double the amount of beds available in the state. Salt Lake City at the end of last year was charged with coming up with a public safety plan. And as a part of their plan, identified that they would find a temporary facility to host 1,000 beds prior to the central campus coming. Part of why we need to talk about this as a membership is essentially we've established as a board and as a league that every city participates in homelessness either by hosting a facility or by contributing to the Shelter Cities Mitigation Fund. By hosting a year-round qualified shelter or participating in the Shelter Cities Mitigation. Right now, even without this massive shelter coming online, the Shelter Cities, as of fiscal year 2024, were running about a $10 million deficit of their public safety expenses that were not being met. Fiscal year 2024 did not include new shelters that came online or stayed online in Sandy City, Tooele, or the West Valley winter response that ended up staying open year round. So we know that that already has a pretty sizable shortfall. And we also know that we have about 1,000 beds that are going to come online. And with Salt Lake saying that they're going to do it sooner rather than later, it kind of begs the question of, do we need to have this mitigation conversation sooner rather than later? Because a big part of the mitigation formula is based on the number of beds a city has, the number of people it serves, and that proportionate impact to the size of their community. We also know that about 2 years ago, the non-shelter cities increased their contributions and increased the cap for their contributions, as well as many other cities have kind of been more engaged through winter response, hosting those winter shelters, Code Blue facilities, things like that. And so right now, for fiscal year 2025, there is about $17.5 million in the mitigation fund. We don't know what the expenses are yet for fiscal year 2025. About 10 million is from municipalities, about 7.5 is from the state for their contributions. We know that the state has no interest of putting more money into that fund. In fact, we've heard kind of different rumblings from the state that they feel like they're putting too much money into the system writ large, and they'd like to see cities and counties putting more into the system overall. So again, we don't exactly know what is going to unfold. We haven't seen a ton of specific language on mitigation, but we're kind of looking to you as the board of folks with shelter cities, non-shelter cities, cities hosting winter response, cities hosting Code Blue, as to how you would suggest we move forward, or if there are any kind of principles and considerations you'd like us to have as we look into this.
I'll make a comment.
Go.
And this goes back to the education, pre-education. The mayor and the staff worked pretty hard from mid-December until the 17th on putting this plan together. And I think it's a very viable plan. but it also requires a lot of work and back to the education side of the house. And part of that education is we're doing a lot of ride-alongs with legislators, with a police officer, usually with one of the commanders, Diamond, and showing them the intricacies of the issue and walking them through and taking them through the city in different areas where we have a lot of homeless and we have a lot of issues throughout the city, but also kind of educating them on the whole process of when you arrest somebody to when they're back out in the streets and the issues that we have that you can't arrest it out because there's no place to put the guy later. So part of that education is just to raise that bar on their knowledge level. And some of the legislators do have a fairly decent knowledge, but I would say the majority of them don't have that knowledge. So if there's, and so I'm putting it out to the board here, if you know of any of your local legislators that are, aren't quite as well informed about the system, contact us. We'll get them in a police officer's car and take them around and show them where and what the process looks like from the police officer standpoint. Because I think it's an eye opener for a number of people, legislators, and to raise that bar up there so that we can, again, make sure everybody's on the same level of understanding when they're trying to make a decision. Because right now that level of understanding is all over the map. And those are the same people that are making the decision. So if you do have people who, legislators you want right or wrong, let us know and we'll get them in the back of the car. So, yeah.
There are two things I want to add to what Molly just said, and thank you for that presentation, Molly. There are a lot of moving pieces in this space. I feel like I say that every year about everything. And it is only day 2, and there's an eternity until March 7th, thankfully not May 7th, March 7th. May 7th was VE Day. I guess March 7th is VL Day, victory at the legislature. But nevertheless, the Salt Lake City plan is comprehensive. And it's holistic and it anticipates additional revenue from somewhere. The mitigation fund, we've had multiple legislators who said they want to make changes to it. And we have our board principles that you've adopted that we're leaning into, but we just want to make sure everybody is aware of all of these different pieces, that there are more facilities now, and there could be some really big facilities coming. And then what does that mean for Park City's contribution in the mitigation fund, or Layton's, or Draper's, or anybody else? The governor is hosting a roundtable at the governor's mansion tomorrow on homelessness. Small group of invites. We've been invited. Molly's going on our behalf. So in a way, I wish board meeting was Friday. We're not calling a board meeting for Friday. We'll have more info from there. But more than anything, like the question on the board agenda was, what should our next steps be? In a way, it's almost a philosophical question, because we're posing the question to you now in light of what has changed in the last few days. So you can be thinking this through so that you're prepared at future LPCs. And if we have to do a board meeting or something else, you've got this additional background. Anything else, Molly, you want to add there?
No, just, you have questions, comments, concerns, let me know. Happy to stay up to date with all of you.
And we can also get you the Salt Lake City plan, because there's a lot of information there that's not just Salt Lake City specific, but the homeless and the sequential intercept model, all that plays in part here. So there's a lot of good educational material to bring yourself up to speed on the broader, bigger issues across the board.
Perfect. And then Mayor Walker, we have Mayor Dodowski online. So we will.
I have one question. The transformative this will be announced.
That is a great question. So the board, OHS had to present locations to the Utah Homeless Services Board on January 15th. It was a closed meeting. Those locations are still very under lock and key. However, it is our understanding that any municipality that could be hosting that facility is aware. So that is one thing. I don't think it's going to come as a surprise to anyone of, we're planning this for your municipality. The target date that the board adopted was to have something operational by October 15th. That, I think, may be aspirational depending on what they can find. If they find a facility that just needs to be renovated, if they're buying dirt And I think that is in large part where Salt Lake City's kind of intermediate plan comes into place, recognizing that there is this vast need, but that it might take a bit longer for the centralized campus to come online. Thank you.
Mayor Walker, then we go to Mayor Nadolski.
Go ahead, Ben.
Thanks, you guys. Appreciate the conversation. And Molly, I'm really anxious to hear what the outcome is for that Friday roundtable. Cam, you mentioned that there's a few legislators that are talking about adjusting the.
Mayor, we lost you. Are you still there?
Lost you.
Mayor?
Mayor, if you can still hear me, will you text me your question? And I'll read it so as not to violate OPMA.
Anyone else while we're waiting?
I have a thought. As I live in Spanish Fork, or community Spanish Fork, or south of Provo. We don't have the infrastructure such as, well, we don't have any infrastructure for social services associated with this. So on one hand, I scoot away for a second. On one hand, I think, well, that's her problem. That's her problem. And I'm contributing, whatever I'm contributing. Then I go see it and I'm like, I can't have that. Some of these people certainly came from Spanish Fork, right? But at the same time, I don't have any tools in my toolbox to deal with this other than police, right? As a city of Spanish Fork, I don't have social services and I don't have the infrastructure and I don't have a revenue source. All I have are raising property taxes, or in Spanish Fork, the growth of my sales tax because of whatever we're doing to zone for dollars, somehow get some increase there. Those are really the only tools. I can't take care of it. So as I deal with homelessness in my community, which again is mostly saying, Provo, thank you, and I'll help a little bit, which drives me nuts, but I don't have a whole lot else I can do. One of the things that I say here is I need more tools. If you're gonna say cities have to pay more, then give me some tools. Because I can't. You're telling me all of these other challenges that I have to do on a daily basis because my city's growing. And you're gonna tell me that you didn't do your property tax notices right, and so now we're gonna take that away from you. You can only get so much of the year, all those other things that we hear about in these legislative sessions. So I don't have. I'm not necessarily gonna stand up and fight against what was talking about here. I just, as cities, I think we need more tools. Please, as we talk to the legislature, don't tell us that you've got to just simply pay more. You think of other tools, and I'll think of some with you, share some thoughts. That's something that I feel like we need. A couple of other potential revenue tools or some way to.
But I think you raise a lot of great points, and it's not on here, but some of those have been brought up in different ways of what is a revenue source that. Regardless of kind of where it is levied or imposed, whether it is municipal, county, state, what is a revenue source that could support this system? I also think you raised a really good question that I've been trying to raise more in these meetings I'm in, which is municipalities certainly have a role to play in this field. They are in charge of public safety and they are in charge of land use. And those are two pieces of how the state addresses homelessness, but that's insufficient. And cities can be, I would say, held accountable, right, for those pieces, but other public entities, other providers, other stakeholders in this space, everyone kind of needs to be providing in that space, right? You say Spanish Fork doesn't have social services, and that's not one of your obligations. Right. And so I think that's something that we really systemically need to figure out of what is everyone's role and how do they do that well? And how do they have the resources to do that well?
And Molly, let me address Mayor Nadolski's question. He just texted, and Seth, it gets a little to your point, and then we'll move to the last item of the housing land use piece. Mayor Nadolski's question is, you've heard from legislators that are considering adjusting the mitigation distribution. Are they wanting to adjust it up or down? And the answer, right, Molly, is yes. Which is tricky for us as an organization because you have some legislators that want to increase it to help with this shortfall. You have other legislators that want to decrease it. And then you have other legislators who want to take into account other things that communities are doing, which is something we had proposed several years ago when the fund was first created, but nobody's still quite sure how to do it. So short answer to Miradowski's question is yes. Long answer is stay tuned. Okay, let's pivot now to housing and land use. Molly, thank you. And I think what may be helpful is after you do the roundtable at the governor's mansion tomorrow, maybe we send a notice out just to the board with an update before Monday. Great.
Did Kaysville say they were okay hosting all of the state's homeless? I thought that's what I read. But yeah.
Yeah. Too soon, Mayor. Housing and land use. Okay. So we have a couple of things to hit here in the next 22 minutes. We wanted to give you an update on the LPC survey results and how that's informing our political capital conversation. We have a question for you around plan review timeframes. And then I want to give Mayor Johnson a few minutes to talk about what they're doing, what they're considering in Lehigh and how it fits into this space. Mayor Walker, item 9 is listed for 5 minutes. I can do it in 1, and then I doubt people have other business, so we can squeeze that 5-minute slot as well. Okay, first on the LPC survey results. Actually, Jared, let's start with you. Let's do the plan review question because the survey results dovetail into Mayor Johnson's concept in Lehigh. So I'll turn it over to Jared to give us a quick update on where the negotiations are around completeness and plan review. We do have some LPC survey results on this one, but I'll let you explain it first.
Okay. So I apologize for bringing this again to you because I brought it many times at film negotiations. At LPC, we asked whether you would be fine, whether those there would be fine with a 2-day screening period. In other words, this is just screening the building permit applications, whether it is complete or not. It is not the plan review itself. It is not looking for whether it meets code. It's not looking, it is simply solely the screening period for completeness. Did they give us the documents? I've been told by Representative Peterson that it takes about 15 minutes to do a check whether those documents are given. So when asked at LPC, are you comfortable with a 2-day screening period and then a 14-day plan review period? We had a majority, 51%, say that they would be comfortable with it, and a large minority saying that they were concerned with it as well. So, what I have proposed and what is currently being discussed and likely will be accepted by the Home Builders Association is a 3-day screening period with a 14-day plan review period. So right now it's still 14-day plan review, but there's really not the clarification on how long we have to determine whether the building permit application is complete. One other nuance, I'm not talking about subdivision approval process. I'm talking specifically about building permit screening and plan review process. The idea is that if we do the screening, sometime during the 3-day screening period, we give them notice that their application is incomplete, we can pause that time period. We can pause and say, we're not continuing forward, and that time tolls. We get as much time as we need until you get us all the documents. If we give them notification that we later find out, oh, we didn't get this document, we thought we had it, but we didn't get it from you, and it's after that screening period, then we would have to continue forward with the plan review as best we could with the documents that we currently have, and throughout the plan review process, get those documents. So it's on us to get those, to determine whether it's complete within 3 days. If we don't do that, then we have to continue forward and not hold them up because we didn't tell them within 3 days whether their application was complete or not. There is, no applications would be accepted without documents being submitted. And if there are documents that are still outstanding, less than 5 days, so it'd be on day 9. After day 9, if you still have not given us, the contractor has not given us the documents that we've been asking for, again, that 5-day tolls. So if they give it on day 14, we have 5 more days to review that specific document. As I've run this past the Utah Association of Building Officials, past various different cities, they felt comfortable with this approach. When asked how long does it take, I asked Representative Peterson, who's the state building official, how long does it take to do plan review? And he said for one plan review for a building permit application, it takes, I mean, it depends on what it is, but average is 4 hours. That's what he told me. So that's the newest proposal. That's what we would like your feedback on. Again, we've upped the day from 2 days to 3 days. And perhaps that can lift the 51% to higher. Or if that's not the case, then we can go back and say, nope, our folks aren't comfortable with it. So
I would also note that the 5138 did not have any of these additional caveats, because what we were trying to achieve is,
thank you.
Right now, what you see on the screen here requires builders to up their game and to actually provide complete applications. And so what we're trying to do is say, fine, we're going to clarify our timeframes, but we're going to expect more of the applications. So yeah, first blush thoughts, recognizing we've got to get back to Mayor Johnson here in a second, but it can take a couple minutes, Mayor Burton.
So start out with, I can say I would be agreeable with that, but I want to also highlight that it might take 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour to review to make sure it's there. But that means your planner has to stop working on the plan he was working on, go out and review that to see if that is done properly, submit that as complete or not, then go back to the plan he was doing, which is extend the time that's going. So it's not just like, oh, all you have to do is play the button and you have it taken care of. It might take just 15 minutes, but it's working that into the system where you're going. And could that be done in 4 hours? I would say yes, on the standard general house, you could do a plan review in 4 hours. But how many of your houses fit that category? And if it's a repeat, that often helps it as well. But if they're very unique, like a lot of these are, and have something special on there, that takes a lot more time in order to research and find it. But I think this is something that we could do and show that we're willing to be good players, because it's also requiring something on the other side as well.
Jared, I think generally speaking, this is only a problem if somebody's on vacation, somebody's sick, and those are the kinds of things, those are the kinds of stories that I think a legislature can say, then deal with it. And I don't think they're wrong, in telling me to figure out how to deal with it. Mayor Burton's correct. Getting it into the queue matters. Just because you applied, I've got $300 or whatever the number is, right? Getting into the queue matters. I think you struck a great balance here. I think these are meaningful changes. I agree with what you said, Cam, in terms of it's elevating their game to. I think cities are going to have to deal with what happens when Seth is gone.
Yeah,
and that's where the 38% are concerned. I think generally speaking, because in my city, maybe it isn't an issue. I've got too deep coverage, but you may not. And certainly they're smaller towns.
Jared, we have a chat from Mayor Nadolski. Says, I can support this proposal. I think we should want to be fast and efficient, and to show them we want to be and are committed to be. This approach provides us enough flexibility and accountability for both sides while ensuring that we're going to be responsive.
Yeah.
flat out took the words right out of my mouth. I think we have that responsibility and we've got to show that this to me is our willingness to say, look, yeah, we own it. We have to do this. And we'll review these in 3 days. And I mean, yes, our plan review is 14 days. That's great, but we've got to be able to tell them this is incomplete. It should not take that long. Again, it is a 15-minute, you're gonna have to pull them off of if they're not somebody at the counter. Yeah, it's gonna take a little longer to do it, but it's not 3 days. It's totally doable.
Okay. Perfect. Well, still, Jeff, we plan to take this back to the other stakeholders, but this was helpful feedback. I guess, any other comments on this one before I pivot to the housing pieces? Well, I want to thank Jared publicly for tremendous amount of work behind the scenes, meeting with a lot of our own people on the inspection and plan review and building official side to understand what's workable, to then be able to build something that, again, elevates the bar for both sides. So let's see where we end up. This is helpful. Okay. Now, I mentioned the LPC survey results. Nick, can you just go back to the agenda we'll set up Mayor Johnson here. We've, in the last few weeks, have surveyed our folks a ton in the housing space to make sure we understood what our sandbox was so we could build the sandcastle. For example, on the MIHP ownership submenu, the response has been quite positive. The people want a safe harbor for the moderate income housing plans and a safe harbor focused on ownership, and they want tools to be able to require home ownership. That's where Mayor Johnson will come in here in a second. On parking stall size, this is an important one from a political capital perspective. We asked the question last week of how high a priority was it for your city to fight a standardized definition of parking stall size in a single family house or two family townhome. 8% said it was a high priority to fight. We also asked how high of a priority is it to fight that a tandem parking spot counts as 2 spots. 10% said it was a high priority to fight out of over 100 responses. So from a political capital perspective, we feel like there's a lot of appetite at the capital to do something in this space. This is not the fight, but other pieces around planning certainly are the fights, right? So we intend to tell Senator Fillmore and others, like, yep, we can live with these standards as long as they're structurally accessible and meet the pieces that we've talked about. We had mixed results around how to handle the state surplus land for, and I'll just note, we now have a map. The state's provided us with a map, and about 40 cities have land that UDOT has identified that could potentially be used for affordable owner-occupied units. We'll be following up individually with those cities to talk about what that could look like. And there's a heavy focus on redeveloping park and rides. And there was a high support at LPC for making changes to code enforcement to be able to crack down on housing units that are not in compliance with code, whether that's on owner occupancy, short-term rentals, and the like. So that was encouraging. And then we had mixed results on the ADU space about a state mandate one way or the other there. So I'm going to put a pin in that one. I mentioned the interest in the density bonus for ownership, and I know it's late, but I wanted to give Mayor Johnson a chance to explain what they're discussing in Lehigh. Now we can do a deeper dive about this in the spring, because I think what they're discussing in Lehigh could end up being a centerpiece of phase 2 of the state housing plan. And those conversations the meetings are already scheduled for April. So the session will end March 7th, and then we'll be jumping into the housing plan. So Mayor, I'll give you a few minutes here. Just talk through your starting point in Lehigh about density bonus in exchange for ownership.
Okay, thanks, Cameron. And Nick's going to help me with the slides here. I appreciate that, Nick. I'm not smart enough to run this thing unless I can plug into it. So, I'm going to literally, Cameron, I think it was a 2-hour meeting down there. It was a 40-minute presentation. Is that going to work? That's good enough right there. So I got a 45-minute presentation, and Cameron said, can you do that in 5 minutes? So I'm like, well, I can do my best. So I spent an hour and a half last night thinking, okay, how am I going to do this? Make the key points here. But I wanted to first talk about the goal of what we're going through down there and the methodology, how we're going to achieve that goal. And by the way, this is something that has been being kicked around. It's our last goal that we have to meet with the state's criteria, and it's this affordable housing plan. But it got kicked around a lot, got kicked back twice from our planning commissioners because they didn't like it, got them pretty upset at our planners. Planners got upset at the commissioners, finally made it up to the city council, hit my desk, everything changed. I went through it with some of the planners. I said, we got to come up with something that'll work, right? We need a plan. If we're going to talk affordability, it has to be affordable. So the goal here for our overlay is to create an attainable opportunity for ownership of single family housings that will, and by the way, it is ownership. We're not talking rent here. People have to be able to own these homes, right? But it creates an opportunity that will provide a good home for a young family and build the equity necessary for a successful financial future. These are the two key points I think are really important. I understand that a lot of people need a place to live, and that's important. But what they need even more than that, and what we need, and what our economy needs, we need an opportunity to build for those young people to build equity in their homes, right? If they don't have a chance to buy a home when they're young, in their 20s or their 30s, they're going to have a hard time ever getting ahead financially in their lives. It just is not going to happen. So just providing rental space is not going to be very effective. We have a plan that we believe will work. I do have the council who has unanimously now been in support of this. So I'm going to go through this methodology. So I'm going to tell you what I'm going to show you in the slides, and I'll get through as many of the slides as I can in a limited amount of time. Okay, so our methodology of doing this is first create a general plan overlay that would be allowed in all vacant parcels meeting certain criteria of an infrastructure analysis, and with the acceptance of a developer's agreement by the city council. Now, what does that mean? It means that we're going to look at every vacant land, all the vacant land we have in town, every parcel, right? Now, some of our parcels are restricted by the amount of ERUs that they can support. So we're going to look at those and we're going to analyze, okay, where can the water come from? Can we store the water? Can we provide the sewer? What about transportation issues? What about power? We're going to address that on all those parcels and say, what parcels can we increase the density on? Item 2 was a developer may receive up to a 50% density bonus for a proposal that meets the construction criteria of starter home and has the limited fixture units. So limiting fixture units, by doing that, by counting fixture units instead of ERUs, if we limit the size of the home, we can get more homes on a piece of property than just using a standard ERU number. We're going to ask for a minimum lot size of 6,000 square foot, a 60-foot frontage. Our city has agreed to a reduced right-of-way section, what we'd normally call the sublocal road. This was something I didn't think our engineers would ever agree to, and they did. They actually proposed it. Getting rid of the park strips. We're doing mountable curbs everywhere. I have some diagrams of that. We're going to do, like I say, limitations on fixture units through smaller house plans. We're proposing house plans that are generally from 1,200 to 1,500 square feet with no basements, right? That's part of this plan. They can go bigger, but it has a consequence. Okay, we are proposing that there's no garages required in the design, but the homes are designed for a future add-on of a garage. Reduce landscaping and fencing requirements. We're removing a lot of that in our city. We're going to do these deed restrictions, or deed restricted. These homes must be owner occupied, or at least occupied by an immediate family owner. You know, in Utah, you have a lot of senior couples that might be living in one of these homes. And they want to leave for a couple of years for whatever reason, and they want somebody to come in and maintain their home while they're there. You know, we don't want to force them into selling that home. The developer must submit a pro forma for the review of the city or by the city that includes proposed house plans and proposed profit margin limitation of 20%. And by the way, the spreadsheet that I'm going to show you in a minute was actually developed with a client of mine that is a home builder, builds primarily patio homes, senior communities, the senior homes. So the numbers I'm using in the 20% is a very realistic and reasonable profit margin for builders.
How do you get that?
I'll explain it later here.
Okay.
Let me get through it first. This will go through with administrative approval. Somebody comes forward, they just go to the planning commission. find out if they meet all the criteria, with the exception of one thing. They'll have to go to city council because this will require a developer's agreement to move forward. Okay. Scroll down a little bit. This is interesting. When we were trying to meet the goal for our city of affordable housing, there are 16 different definitions in the state code for what affordable housing is, right? So part of this presentation tries to address some of that. That's just a very difficult number to identify. One thing that is driving this, I grew up in a post-war home. I suspect there's a few people in this room who's probably done that, right? It was a 900 square foot home, 2 bedrooms. There was 3 children. I was the youngest of the 3. Me, my brother, my sister, we all shared a bedroom that was 9 by 10. My parents were in the other bedroom. Okay. We survived. It actually was a good life. It was a good childhood. It was a great neighborhood we lived in because almost all the homes around us were the same. We have been through housing crisis before. Post-war housing was built in the 1950s. In the 1980s, I bought my first house, right? It was an 1,100 square foot house, right? Tri-level home. It had a partial basement. I finished that on my own. And by the way, when I grew up in that post-war home, I considered anybody rich if they had a basement in their home because our home didn't have a basement. I thought that was pretty awesome because I had friends that actually had their own bedroom. Okay, let's go to our PowerPoint real quick if you can, Nick. Let's scroll down to slide 6. Let's just start there. Okay, here's an example of some of these post-war housing. We have a lot in Lehigh. I suspect most communities along the Wasatch Front have very similar homes. These are homes that usually are somewhere between 900 and about 1,100 square feet. A lot of these homes still exist. The value of these homes, and you can scroll through some of these next slides slowly if you want to. A lot of these homes are actually fairly attractive homes. Some of them have been rebuilt. Some of them just look fantastic. Stop right there. These homes right now, you can see a price value on those. The one on the corner is around 450. The others are all under 400,000. Those are for homes that are between 900 and 1,100 square foot that are built in the 1950s, right? Go ahead and scroll farther down through. We look at some of the townhomes today, and that's what we're building. We're building a lot of these townhomes. They have very narrow setbacks on the side yards, and they're popular, but the price on these, keep scrolling, you'll see the price right there. You'll see these are starting around 460 and go up. Some of them are 5, some are hitting the $700,000 mark. Okay, scroll down, keep going. Stop right there. This is a project I've been working on. For some of you who don't know, I actually own a little engineering firm. We serve municipalities on some road work. I also serve some development clients. This is one, of course, that you can see in West Haven up there. It was actually the developer that helped me put the numbers together. He actually proposed a senior community on this property. They didn't want that. They wanted smaller patio homes. So this is a project. These are 50 foot yard lots, 120 foot deep. The homes on these are going to be between 1,500 and 1,900 square feet. I'm going to show you that these no basements. That's what a patio, by definition, that's what a patio home is. Scroll through. There's a floor plan of one of those homes that's being proposed. 2 car garage, 2 full baths, couple front possibilities. Now it's freeze right here. This is our pricing structure. Okay. So you can see up at the top row, we have the size of the home. We started with a 1,000 square foot. I don't know that many will want to build that, but we wanted to include that in the list. We have a 1,200, a 1,500, and 1,900 square foot home listed. The last 4 rows show those same homes if you add a basement. But for analysis sake and for attainable sake, we looked at these and say, okay, what is an actual attainable number? What is the cost point that our young kids are looking to buy today? And for most of that, it's under 400,000, right? Most of them will tell you they need to be around 300,000. And if you look at this is a as an example, go to this, the patio home that's 1,200 square foot. This is priced out to not have a 2-car garage immediately, but a 2-car carport. It's built on the sublocal road. It has a 6,000 square foot lot, as mentioned. And it also comes, is priced out to have the front yard landscaped and some fencing. The cost of that home is $339,480. That is the price point that a lot of kids can get into. That's an important number, right? Any of those are important. Now, this is going to vary depending on what city it's in, understandably. I actually think I can hit some of these prices in Lehigh City. And my city right now has been recognized as some of the highest real estate, in the state, unfortunately. But as you go across the bottom, you can see that the prices increase depending on the size of the home, but they definitely increase when we add a basement too. Now, the one caveat with this plan is, as I mentioned, we are looking at fixture units, not ERUs. So if we build a 1,200 or a 1,500 square foot that has 2 bathrooms with no basement, and they include a basement, that doubles the amount of fixture units potential of that home. They do not get a 50% bonus on the land. But if they're under that, they can build layman toilets, sinks, showers, tubs, right? Okay, that's the fixture units. That's how they're counted. So it is trying to squeeze every bit of potential out of the land that we can. But it builds affordable housing. If a developer comes in and says, nope, I'm not going to build a home without a basement, we can say, fine, but you're not going to get 50% increase on your homes. Okay. You'll get an increase, but it may not be that much. Now, at the end of the day, we're proposing this as an option for any builder that comes in. He can either develop on the land as it's currently zoned, or he can look at the general plan and say, this parcel has been identified as one for the AHOZ zone, and I want to take advantage of that. I want the increase. So he can have it. He comes through with a plan, goes to the planning commission, goes through the process, and then goes to the city council to finalize the developer's agreement. And he can build a subdivision of homes. They're generally $400,000 or less.
You make this available to everyone who wants it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, man. That's
So-
awesome.
I believe a good chunk of it is in the packet. There's a link in the packet, housing affordability work session presentation.
Now, the one that's in the packet, and I sent you a new version, we may want to update that because a couple of the notes, the side notes were edited by somebody else and they missed some things. This has been corrected.
Okay, great.
And I actually already sent you the new.
Certainly a proactive approach. Thank you.
Yes, I think this is a great opportunity.
Then, yeah, Mayor Walker, part of the reason I wanted to give Mayor Johnson a chance to present this concept is there's going to be a lot of dialogue over the next 44 days about density bonuses in exchange for ownership. Salt Lake City has a very aggressive density bonus program that's focused on affordability. Moab has a density bonus program that's focused on workforce housing, but it's more focused on affordability. This is really the first one I'm aware of in Utah that is truly focused on ownership. And whether the methodology works for Mapleton and West Jordan that's up to you. But we want to just give you this case study. So as we come to LPC in future weeks and say, here's what we're working on in enabling language, it helps create this sort of conversation in your communities.
Thanks. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're
Perfect.
good.
Great. So Justin, no bill tracker, we're okay until Monday?
We're good.
Great. Okay, I recognize we are 6 minutes over. We started 5 minutes late, so we're technically just 1 minute late. I will do the executive director report in 1 minute. National League of Cities Conference is coming up right after the session. Let us know if you're planning to attend. We will be doing a research request during the session around tax exempt municipal bonds. That's one of the issues that might be on the chopping block as Congress is discussing some very necessary budget changes. But this has been identified as one of the potential pay-fors, which could have really negative consequences on how we pay for infrastructure. And you think about everything we've talked about on housing, losing that tool could be really devastating. So we're going to do some research in partnership with NLC about that tool and how it's been used in the state of Utah. We also will be doing a state night, so let us know if you're coming. I want to applaud Mayor Shepherd. He had to leave a moment ago, but NLC's tapped him to be the co-chair of their new housing committee. And then in April, the mid-year conference keynote speaker will be Arthur Brooks. We are partnering with the Gardner Policy Institute to bring him to St. George for that event. So we're really excited. You remember we had Tim Shriver through Gardner before. This time we'll have Arthur, and it'll dovetail nicely into what Molly's been doing on the conflict competency. If you do not have an updated picture or bio for the league website, we'll have that in our follow-up email so we can get our website updated. A few of you are missing pictures and bios. And then last but not least, our next board meeting is scheduled for Monday, March 24th at 9:30. Staff recommends moving that to noon so we can make it a lunch meeting rather than a mid-morning meeting. We often do mid-morning to dovetail with LPC, but there is no LPC in March. So Mayor Walker, you've already approved the calendar, so we just need a motion to move the time to noon.
For a motion to move the time to noon for lunch.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? All right.
Great. And with that, thank you everybody for your time today. It was an excellent day. And we'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, we'll update the invite. We'll update that.
Second.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody online.